And other people were like, don't lift too heavy because you might hurt yourself, or don't change your body because men don't like women who are bulky. And I was like, where does this idea come from that we can comment on women's hobbies and contextualize it in this way? Whereas I know if I were a man telling people that I were competing in a bodybuilding show, they're not getting this pushback about like, don't lift too heavy, don't change your body.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Talk Your Abs Off. I'm your host, Abby Clapper, and today we are joined by Haley Shapley, who is the author of Strong Like Her, and also an award-winning journalist whose writing has appeared in Shape, Self, Teen Vogue, Forbes Health, the Saturday Evening Post, Sierra, The Telegraph, and many other publications. She's an Olympic superfan and an exercise enthusiast. She cycled 206 miles from Seattle to Portland, summited the highest glaciated peak in the continental United States, competed in a bodybuilding show, and run a marathon. Ooh, hi, Haley. Holy cow, that's a lot. How are you?
It's making me tired just thinking about it, but I'm good. Thanks.
That is so amazing. You have done so much. And, this is a fitness podcast. So first question I have for you is, how did your own fitness journey start? How did you get into all those things?
I always liked exercising. I always liked playing sports and moving my body. So I tried a lot of different things when I was growing up, from swimming to soccer to gymnastics to ballet. And I kind of settled on basketball as my main sport, with tennis and swimming being my other sports that I played in high school. And I just liked to try new things. So I kind of continued that in college. And then I found when I was an adult and out in the real world, I had a lot less time to work out, and I was looking for some structure. So that's kind of why I did a lot of those different challenges. I needed to give myself a goal to reach for in order to kind of give myself that structure I used to have as an athlete growing up.
Yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of people run into that. We have all this time when we're younger. And then, like you said, you were active through college. But once we get to our corporate jobs, all of that time that we had goes out the window, and it changes for so many people. Everyone's activity level changes, and it can be really tough.
Yeah. And I think it's just like, well, what do I do now? If I don't have 2 hours of practice after school. I tried beach volleyball for a while. I joined a league, and that was fun. But yeah, your fitness evolves over time. And so that's how I've racked up so many different things.
That is incredible. So apart from all of the physical things that you've done, because you did so many things, you have climbed glaciated peaks, you've cycled 206 miles, you've competed in bodybuilding, run a marathon. I also want to know how you got started writing about exercise and specifically women's sports in all of those things that you were able to publish works of writing in.
Right. Yeah. Well, I've long written about health because it's something that interests me. And I think, when you're interested in something, you go toward that. And you, as a freelance writer, I'm lucky that I can kind of explore topics that interest me. I really started getting into kind of sports and fitness writing, though, when I was working on my book, Strong Like Her. And I got the idea for that book from competing in a bodybuilding show. So I found that when I was training for it, people reacted in really interesting ways to me. Some people were like, oh, what does your sparkly bikini look like? And what's your training plan? And what are you eating? And other people were like, don't lift too heavy because you might hurt yourself, or don't change your body because men don't like women who are bulky. And I was like, where does this idea come from that we can kind of comment on women's hobbies and contextualize it in this way? Whereas I know if I were a man telling people that I were competing in a bodybuilding show, they're not getting this pushback about like, don't lift too heavy, don't change your body. So I really wanted to dig into the history of women in fitness, particularly women in strength training. And I checked out a bunch of books from the library, and I discovered that all of them were mostly written about men. There were very few pages in these books about women. And you can find women's individual stories and biographies and such, but there was no real survey of women in fitness. And so I saw an opening to cover that. And as I started researching, then I also started writing more just about sports and fitness in general.
That is so cool. And I love that because as a personal trainer, like the fitness industry is a wild place, especially for women. I work a lot with clients who are neurodivergent, have chronic health conditions, and hypermobility, and so I see like underrepresentation for that population. But when it comes to women, like you said, it is all over the board. It's like either someone is saying like you're doing too much, or you're doing too little, or you're eating too much, or you're eating too little, and it is just a crazy place for a woman to be, and it shouldn't be. Like fitness is for everybody.
Yes. Absolutely. And I really wanted to show through the book that strength is for everyone. And that strength looks very different on different people. It can mean different things. But I have 23 photos of modern day athletes in the book who all represent like a different body type, a different athletic discipline. And they all look very different, but they're all really freaking strong. And so I wanted to show that whatever you like to do, there is a place for you. There is something for you. It doesn't have to be what someone else is doing, but movement of some kind is vital for everyone. So it's important to find what resonates with you.
Yes, that is my favorite message because like you talked about too, so many things are catered towards men. Like women, we can lift similar. I mean, oftentimes we should be lifting. Like women lift similarly to men. Like there's not a lot of differences. We do see Pilates and we see some other types of workouts that are catered for women, but general strength training workouts between men and women are very similar. If we're looking to just work, say muscle groups, things like that, it can be tailored to something that you enjoy more. But oftentimes, like when we go into the gym, we'll see all of these men who are like grunting and throwing weights around, and women are like, I don't want to do that, but we still want to be strong, and we still know that there's a lot that we can do. When we talk about women and like doing structured exercise, when did we really start to see women like participating in this? Because like I think back to, I've seen pictures like these like old clips of men like weightlifting with those, those circle barbells, like the circles on the ends. And I don't know what those are made of, but
Yeah.
I'm curious, like we see all these things that like look barbaric, but that's probably what they just used way back in the day. But when did we really start seeing women doing the same types of movements as men?
That's a good question. Those are called circus dumbbells, and the
No way.
circus is actually one place where we see that. It's kind of waxed and waned over the years. I would say the first real movement for women to have access to fitness in modern times was in the early 1800s, actually. Calisthenics classes were pretty popular at schools for girls and women. There was a movement within the educational field to have girls have physical education in addition to obviously like a mental education. And Catherine Beecher was one of the leaders of that. She has a book that she published in the 1840s that outlined her theories on that. So you see girls working out then. I think kind of the next inflection point was in the 1930s in the wake kind of the Great Depression. And I cover this in the book, but Muscle Beach became this kind of sensation where people were coming and working out. And it started initially as acrobats who were out of work, kind of needed a place to keep their skills sharp. And they all congregated there where there was some gym equipment. But it turned into this place where people came and lifted weights and learned new skills. And although most of those people were men, there was definitely an influential population of women who were also on the beach. And one of those women was Pudgy Stockton, who was known as the Queen of Muscle Beach. And she became quite influential in encouraging women to work out. She wrote a column in Strength and Health magazine for about 10 years called Barbells, bells with Bells, which was really cute. And she gave a lot of practical advice, which is what women needed. What shoes do I wear when I'm lifting? What do I do in this situation? Bowling shoes were what she recommended at the time, interestingly. And she actually had to have her mom hand sew her a swimsuit that she could move in on the beach because there weren't fitness clothes at the time, So I wouldn't say it was like exactly mainstream at that point, but there definitely were a lot of women who were starting to get into the idea of working out with dumbbells and working out with even barbells. Although I think the everyday woman was more likely to kind of pick up some of those lighter dumbbells at the time. And there were also some other implements that were popular. They were like pins, like kind of looked like bowling pins. So we see women working out in similar capacities as men there. And then the next kind of phase when we really start to see women and men, at least in the weight room together, is in the 1970s. And you did have to have kind of an invitation from a man to get into the weight room at this time. Usually women would tag along with a boyfriend or a brother or something like that. But we do start to see women involved in powerlifting, weightlifting. The first bodybuilding competition happened in the late 70s. So in the wake of Title IX, which in the US required schools to offer sports programs for girls, among many other things, but that's sort of what we know it for. We see the participation in sports like skyrocketing, and thus we see more women interested in sports of all kinds and strength training. So I think those are kind of some of the points along the way where girls and women were able to work out on at least somewhat equal footing with men.
Yeah, that's incredible. The one thing, a woman needing an invitation to the gym with a man, straight to jail. That's crazy.
I know. Well, and it wasn't like required, I guess, but back in the day, those weight rooms were not places you just signed up for a membership and walked into. Even in modern times, a lot of women are very intimidated to go into a weight room and start lifting. And so that's magnified by so much in the 70s. And so you had to be a very confident woman to walk into that space. And of all the women I interviewed for the book who did start lifting at that time, they all did have essentially someone who accompanied them.
Wow, that is so wild. I can't imagine that like being a requirement now. Like there's already so many barriers to entry for women to like get into the gym. Like you said, because of intimidation, that would limit it so much more. So I'm glad we've moved past that and we all are way more welcome in that space now. That's crazy.
Yes, definitely. And we owe a debt of gratitude to the women who were willing to go in there at that time when it was less hospitable. Although many do report that once they got there, the men were very encouraging, but it just wasn't something that people were used to seeing. So
yeah,
it was definitely different. And then, of course, I guess I should say the 80s ushers in the rise of aerobics and group exercise classes, which really appealed to women. And so a lot of women kind of got into the gym that way as well. And that has continued, boutique fitness continues to be a really big industry.
yeah, that's great. I know I teach group exercise classes now, and it is just such a good community, social aspect. It is mostly women, depending on the class. I think, I don't know. I wonder if there's anything to that. The fact that like group exercise is, well, a lot of classes. I mean, if we look at like CrossFit, that's one thing that's maybe more men. And then we look at like other places that have classes that are majority more women. So I wonder if there's any correlation there.
Yeah, I mean, I think classes started with being marketed toward women, and it's just kind of continued that way. CrossFit is actually about 50-50, which is interesting, I think, because it's a very different style of training than most group exercise classes, at least when it debuted. There are now a lot more kind of boot camp style classes and things like that people are getting into.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so funny. There's one of the classes that I teach is like a core class, and it's mostly women. Sometimes I'll get like one or two men. And one of the women said one day, she was like, well, you should do a class like just for our husbands. And I was like, oh, well, how do you suppose I market that? And she's like, I don't know, just market it to the men. And I'm like, well, that's going to be very difficult because even in a group exercise space, to have them come into a studio and, whatever we're marketing for it, it's still very hard to get, in my opinion, from what I've seen, a lot of men to come in and do exercise together. That's not lifting heavy weights in the weight room.
Yeah, that's really interesting, sort of how that's evolved that way, because back in ancient Greece, they were all working out together in the gymnasia. So there was a culture of group exercise back then, but maybe it just has to do with the types of exercise that is typically in group classes and probably just how that's been marketed over the years.
For sure. So you talked about ancient Greece. I want to kind of dig into that a little bit. So you said you're passionate about the Olympics, which from my research seems to date back, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, all the way back to 776 BC. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so that was like the original, and then it kind of had like a resurgence in the 1800s, I think. And can you tell me about when women were able to start competing and how that kind of came about? Because I'm sure it was a boys' club before, I'm sure women weren't allowed to do it at first.
Yes, in the ancient Olympics, women were not allowed. They couldn't even come into the stadium. Although there are some reports that some were able to watch later on, but certainly only men could compete. However, I do cover a story I love in the book of a woman named Kuniska, who was a Spartan princess. And she owned some very fast horses. And in the ancient games, the Tethrippon, which was a chariot race, the winner of that was actually the owner of the horses, not the horses because they were horses, and not the driver of them because that was usually a slave. So in a loophole, Kuniska wins in back-to-back Olympics, and she has an inscription in the Temple of Zeus that says, "I am the only woman in all of Greece to have achieved this." However, she was not allowed to come in to the stadium to accept her award, but she did technically win. So there were some loopholes, and there are some stories of women dressing up as men to kind of sneak in, not to compete, but there was a woman who trained her son after her husband died. It was either wrestling or boxing, something like that. I think wrestling. And she got caught. But she was a very competent trainer because he was a champion. And I think her brother had won as well. So they were just an athletic family. But the first time women are technically allowed to compete is in 1900. And that was the second modern games. So they started back up again in 1896. And in 1900 in Paris, there were 5 different sports that women could compete in. I think there were 22 women out of just under 1,000 athletes who competed. And they were able to do tennis, sailing, equestrian, golf, and croquet.
Wow.
They had to wear, as you can imagine, outfits that were not conducive to exercise. So we're talking, ankle-length skirts and booties and such. But a handful of them managed to make it work.
Wow, that is incredible. And it's so crazy to me as a personal trainer hearing that the woman who snuck in who had trained her son and her brother, and like that's basically essentially the earliest trainer that I've ever heard of. And she was so proud of them that she wanted to go and watch. And I think that that's beautiful, but it's sad that they had to kick her out.
I know. Yes, I can't remember what happened to her. I'm pretty sure they kicked her out, but they had actually a law on the books that a woman who was found in the stadium would be thrown off a cliff into the river below. But there's no evidence that they ever actually threw women off a cliff for going into the Olympics. So it was probably just one of those laws that wasn't enforced, I hope.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
But it was not a welcoming environment for women. We'll put it that way.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, though, because Greece, it was a diverse place depending on city state. So while in Athens, it was not acceptable for girls to be exercising, it was not acceptable for girls to really be outside of their home, certainly not mingling with any men who were not either their brother or father or husband. In Sparta, it was completely different. They actually did encourage women to exercise. They believed that strong children was the goal, and that strong children came from a strong father and a strong mother. So girls got a physical education. They were known to have a different physique than the women from other city-states because they had some muscle and because they ran and did that. And there were some games later in ancient Greek history, in more recent history, that were kind of like a spin-off of the Olympics for women only, but only like the women from Sparta really competed, and maybe some others, but it was limited in who was sort of allowed to compete.
Wow, that is so interesting. And I think it's also crazy to think about like the Olympics then and like what women were allowed to do to present day Olympics and seeing how influential the women are now and like just how far it has come. I mean, we have the women like, unfortunately, I'm really bad with names. So we had like the figure skater who in the most recent Olympics, who she was on the US team, was like very inspirational to a lot of women. We have Alana Mayer who plays rugby and just like all of these women who are setting such a great example, like for the everyday woman now to just be strong, like no matter what your body looks like. And I think that that is just, it's so crazy to think of like where the Olympics came from to where it is now.
I know, it's great. And it's interesting that the first Olympics that women were allowed to compete in were in Paris because we just had the Paris Summer Games most recently. And so you can really compare and contrast where, you know, this minuscule percentage of women are participating then, whereas we had 50-50 participation in the most recent Paris Games. So it's cool that it's come so far. And I think especially for a USA audience, our women athletes are way more successful at the Olympics than male athletes. And that's not to, you know, to put them down or anything, but our women are incredible. They are winning us a lot of medals. And yeah, I love to see it.
Yeah, and they're also just spreading such a good message about, you know, eating to fuel your body, eating to enjoy food, working out to feel good in your body no matter what your body looks like. I hope that, you know, within the fitness industry we're kind of making that shift towards, you know, being healthy as opposed to, you know, like looking a certain way. And, you know, we've now talked about the Olympics, we've talked about when women were kind of able to enter the gym space. How do you think that that has really played into like body image and how that's changed over the years for women? Like I know we're still, I think, stuck in like a skinny era of like everybody wants to be skinny, but how has that changed, do you think?
You know, the interesting thing I found about body image is that our body standards change so much over time and change really quickly. So when it comes to facial beauty, that is actually pretty static. So if you got transported 500 years ago to another civilization, you'd probably be able to pick out who was conventionally attractive based on some of these things like symmetry and other things that signal to our brains like that is a good looking person. But you would not be able, unless you had some context, to pick out the ideal bodies because that changes so rapidly. And it particularly changes for women. And so I think what's great about athletes now is we're getting more representation of different body types. Like I was mentioning before, strength looks different ways. You can be fit and look a lot of different ways. And I think we have more understanding of that now. But I think we're still very much prone to these, like this roller coaster of what kind of body is in and out. Just in the past few years, I think we are sliding a little bit back more toward thinness being really elevated more than it was in maybe the 2010s and early 2020s. So it's interesting how our ideas change. And I think I get into it, but there's several factors involved in what makes a body desirable at a particular time in a particular social circle. But I think that women just continuing to exist in their bodies and to show that we all look different, that's okay. There isn't this like one ideal is great. And I think it's also important to know that no one will always fit the trend. So there's no reason to chase it because it will change and no one will be in for their entire life. So you might as well just embrace who you are and roll with that.
Yeah. I also wonder like how is society even like setting this standard for like what is in, you know, like there's not one person who's like deciding this. It's like somehow collectively as a society, everyone is deciding. And I think I'm seeing it a lot now more, especially with like like I'm in my 30s, so personal trainers who are my age or maybe a little bit younger who are really starting to challenge that narrative. And we see both sides. Like we see, and there's nothing wrong with, with someone who wants to lose weight for their health, lose weight for aesthetics, totally okay. But that's not the only reason that someone can exercise, right? Someone can exercise because they enjoy it. They want to be stronger. We all want to be stronger as we age. So, I mean, my hope as a personal trainer is that as we continue, hopefully with this trend of it's mostly women who are speaking up, women who are personal trainers who want everyone to feel welcome in the fitness industry. Who I think there's an organization I think called Healthy at Every Size. One of my friends is a trainer. And trains like according to that thought process as well. And I think I think it's brilliant. I think it's something that allows all of us, like you said, to exist in our bodies and in the fitness space and just be. And hopefully at some point we can all, just be accepted for who we are and not have to fit a certain standard, because it's so incredibly frustrating to have this conversation with so many people of, oh, I want to lose weight and all these things. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's cyclical.
Yeah, and I think even to the critics who don't like something like the healthy at every size movement, it's like research shows over and over again that people do better at reaching their health and fitness goals if they are accepted as they are. Like loathing doesn't actually motivate people that much. Like shame isn't a really great motivator, but like a positive goal is a much better motivator. So just this idea of like, oh, we shouldn't be like celebrating this. Like, no, actually, if we lift people up, then it gives them more motivation to, pursue whatever goal they want. And maybe it doesn't fit what you think their goal should be, but it's better overall to have people have some positive motivation.
Yeah. And I think another good example of that is, like you mentioned earlier, when you were competing in bodybuilding, people had opinions on both sides, whether you were lifting too much or, looking a certain way. I mean, tell me a little bit more about that experience for you, because bodybuilding is a world that I have never been in. And so I only know what I see on the outside. So I'd love to know a little bit more about that experience for you.
It's a very interesting subculture, actually. And on that note, I was just at a gym the other day that had a little fair for people's products. And I brought the book, which has a power lifter on the cover who I would not consider overly muscular or anything like that. And these are all subjective things. But a woman came up to me and she was like, "That's a little much, don't you think?" And I was like, well, actually, no, because I wrote the book and I really like this person and would love to have her biceps. But also, like, what made you think that stopping and asking that question was a good thing to do? And she actually came back a couple minutes later and apologized because she didn't want to put down my sport, is what she said, which was interesting because it's not even my sport. I appreciate that she went back and thought about it, but I've gotten that comment more than once where people will be like, "Don't you think that she's gone too far? She's taken it too far." And we all have ideas about how we want our bodies to look, and that's okay. I actually think that's fine. What we don't have is the right to go up to anyone and tell them like what we think about what they've chosen to do with their own bodies. So yeah, and back to your question though, in bodybuilding, it's just a very interesting sport. You have to be really disciplined. And I think that's a double-edged sword because I don't think it's always good to be that disciplined. Again, this is why I had it as more of a short-term goal, although I did train for 9 months for my first show, and I continued to train for a while afterwards. And there were a lot of positives about it, actually, in terms of like my efficiency. I became really like structured during my day and I got a lot done because I had to work out so much that I really had to plan. And I liked that. I kind of got into a groove. I really got into a groove with eating. You have to plan ahead. You're counting your macros. For some people, that is not good for them. For me, I liked having the structure. I liked sort of knowing when I was going to eat and what I was going to eat. It took a lot of decision making out of the day, which is what tends to trip me up. So that part was good. I think like toward the end, when you're prepping to get on stage, that's where it can get a little bit dicey in terms of, the amount of food you're consuming or water that you're consuming. You kind of stop drinking water right before the show in order to have your muscles pop out more and that kind of thing. So, I didn't love that part toward the end because I got really tired. I was really fatigued because I wasn't getting enough energy to support my activity level. But that was really only at the very end. Leading up to that, I felt great. I was fit. I was healthy, feeling good. I went and had my blood work done. It was like absolutely perfect. So it was really interesting show and then or experience. And then you get into everything related to the show with like my 6 layers of spray tan. And there's a lot of interesting things you encounter where you realize like, you can't actually wash your hands after you use the restroom when you have 6 layers of tan on you. So you just have to roll with it for that time. And you're only eating asparagus and like cod. So the backstage smells horrific between everyone's like asparagus emanating from them and the smell of spray tan and all of that. So it's just a really interesting experience.
Yeah, that's so funny. I always like the behind the scenes look at it because from the outside it's like, wow, everyone looks like so incredible. You've worked so hard, but the behind the scenes is always what I like to hear about, like the nitty-gritty of what's really going on back there. So
oh yeah, everyone's thirsty.
I'm sure.
Everyone is like
hungry.
You're hungry. You're just like, I smell bad. You can't put on deodorant because that would ruin your tan. So, and I feel really bad. You see at every show, a guy or two who ends up sweating a ton because the stage lights are like quite bright. So you get out there and when you're flexing, that's one thing. The flexing is hard work. It doesn't look like it, but you're really like, I don't know if you ever do isometric workouts, like to hold a position it can be very taxing. And so you get these guys on stage who are dehydrated, maybe prone to sweating to start with, they're big guys and they are sweating off their spray tan as they're exerting themselves so much. And you just see the little like rolls of tan going down.
That's so fun. Oh my gosh. Well, on the topic of competitions, something else that you have extensive knowledge about that caught my attention was like the increased popularity of CrossFit, powerlifting, and obstacle course races. So I've been on something about HYROX lately because I feel like I feel like it just popped up out of nowhere. And so I've been on just a rampage about like questioning all of HYROX, but all that to say, where did all of these like intense competitions come from? Did it come from the Olympics? Like what was the idea behind all of these?
That's a good question. I feel like HYROX came out of CrossFit. And I feel like CrossFit kind of started everything in the early 2000s. Why did CrossFit take off? I think because it has a group class atmosphere that people enjoy, and it is equally appealing to men and women. And I'd CrossFitted for 5 years. I don't anymore, but I did it for 5 years, and like it's a really strong community. So the gym I'm at now is fine. Nobody knows when I'm not there. Nobody cares when I'm not there. I recently had a non-sports related injury that kept me out of the gym, and no one checked on me. And that's fine. That's kind of like a big box gym experience, right? Whereas CrossFit, like if I didn't show up for a day or two, I would have absolutely had people emailing me. I went to someone's door once when they didn't show up for CrossFit because they lived across the gym, and I'm like, where are you, man? So I think that kind of like social aspect was really appealing to people. And I think women particularly took to it because it had barbells. And once women realized like how cool it is to lift a barbell, lift way heavier weight than they ever thought they were capable of, that's really empowering. And I think that got them coming back and kind of spread the message. And then from CrossFit, so CrossFit covers like cardio elements and strength training elements. And so you get a little taste of powerlifting and Olympic weightlifting within CrossFit. And that, I think, helped drive especially the entrance of women into powerlifting and weightlifting, because some were like, I'm taking CrossFit, but I'm actually like more interested in this part of it. I'm going to go train for a powerlifting meet now, or that's just how I'm going to train. And so I think that fueled like some of these, maybe what you call intense, like weightlifting sports. Then I think obstacle course racing just kind of came alongside that. You know, people, that probably also like dovetailed with people's interest in marathons and 10Ks and things like that. That's only becoming more popular. And it's a combination of those things. So I think that's great. And then I think HYROX has taken off because it's on the balance, probably the most accessible of all of these things that we're talking about in terms of like the movement patterns. So in Olympic weightlifting, it's very technical. To be a good weightlifter, it takes time to develop that. And HYROX strips out those very technical moves and leaves more basic movement patterns in. So it kind of feels like something that anyone can try who has been working out with those modalities.
That is so cool. It's funny, I didn't even think about that because like I was looking at HYROX and I was like, this is just CrossFit Games. But CrossFit Games has more of like that Olympic lifting, like you're saying, and this takes it out. You still get your burpees, you still get your wall balls. But I never thought of it as more accessible. But I guess that actually makes sense. Like it's probably more achievable for the average gym goer than like CrossFit Games would be.
Definitely. I think that is part of why it's popular, because I don't know, you look at something like double unders. So that is when you're jumping rope and the rope passes 2 times under your feet. It can take, some people just don't have the coordination for double unders, or it takes them a while, or they get really frustrated. You can get really hung up on it. So I used to like judge some CrossFit competitions and people can get stuck there, you know, or if you're doing a snatch, like, and you don't lock out your arm. So that's where you're taking the bar from the ground to above your head in one movement. That's not a complete snatch. And that can take time to get all that down. A wall ball is, all things considered, a fairly easy thing to squat and then throw it up. You can run, you know, you can do a burpee. A burpee broad jump is just a terrible exercise, but it is a fairly accessible movement.
For sure. And I think they do like the walking lunges and something else too. It's funny, like the more I talk to people about HYROX, I'm really trying to come around to like the idea of it, because as I've mentioned it before on the show, like the only people I see on my social media are like the elite athletes who are doing HYROX. And I'm like, this isn't accessible for anybody except for these people who are training like crazy amounts. So I'm happy to hear that, you know, other people's algorithms hopefully are seeing the average gym goer be able to accomplish this. I actually saw 2 people I used to work with do one, I think in New York. And I was like, wow, like this is, you know, normal people can do it. Like, this is great. So I think that's awesome. And I need to check my biases when I come around to like those kind of things where I'm like, gosh, some of these things just seem crazy. And I'm also curious about like the Spartan obstacle course races. Is that based off of, do you know if it's based off of anything from Sparta or anything in the past?
Oh, I've read Joe DeSena's book, a couple of his books. He is the founder of Spartan Racing. I mean, I think it's modeled after, you know, just working hard, lifting heavy stuff. Running.
Yeah, they do them here in Tampa and it's hot and it's just, it looks crazy. So
again, me and the heat don't. But I really enjoyed it actually, because I don't know, you're running and then you get to do something else, kind of mixes it up a little bit. I think that might be why people like HYROX too. And I've never done HYROX, so your biases don't hurt my feelings. But I think there is something appealing about like, I'm going to run a little and then, oh, okay, I can do something different. That may be some people who think like, oh, I don't want to run a straight 13 miles or 26 miles. But like if I stop and do something else in the middle, that might make it more appealing.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point. Because like I was a distance runner, so like I ran 1 marathon, and that it might be the only one I ever run, but like I like running distance. But so then I look at like a HYROX and I'm like, oh my God, that looks terrible. Like you're telling me I have to run fast and then I have to do a bunch of like strength exercise. Like I'm an endurance athlete. I'm not a power athlete. So to each their own, right? Everybody's good at something different. So
yes, agreed. I used to think I was an endurance athlete, and then I realized I'm not an endurance athlete or a power athlete. I just
and there's nothing wrong with that. You're just an athlete. We're all athletes.
I don't know what I am. That's probably why I do many different things. But
I love it. I love it. Well, the last part of my show that I always like to ask my guests, as we know, the fitness industry, as we've kind of talked about, can be very toxic. And so I'm curious, what is something in fitness culture that you feel that we can absolve ourselves of any guilt and shame of?
I would say that getting up early and to work out is virtuous. If you like to get up early to work out, it fits with your schedule, you feel good in the morning, go for it. I think it's great to, get your workout done at the beginning of the day. We do see like in habit formation that if you can do something first thing in the morning, that it is, it's good for you. However, we don't work out better in the morning. Most people, studies show, work out best in the afternoon or evening. That is when we have better aerobic capacity, better grip strength. We have better flexibility as well. Like the more warmed up your muscles are, the better. Oftentimes they're a little bit cold when you're first waking up. And this is of particular interest to me because my next book is called Night Owl, Staying Up Late in a World Built for Early Birds. And I'm a lifelong night owl. I like to work out in the evening. Every time I've tried to work out in the morning, I'll convince myself that I've done really well. And then when I go, one time I worked out at 6:30 and then I retested the same workout like a month later at my normal time. And I just absolutely crushed what I had done before because I was like sleepwalking. But I didn't know that at the time. I was just like, wow, I'm so cool. I'm here early. But I actually get better performance in the evening. And everyone has a chronotype that kind of dictates your preferred sleep wake times, when you get your energy bursts throughout the day, that kind of a thing. And we can't all live in perfect accordance with our chronotype. But if your chronotype is telling you, I don't work out well in the morning, I want to give you permission to work out later. It's okay. The early bird does not always catch the worm. And there's just a lot of rhetoric, particularly online, about if you're really dedicated that you're going to get up at 5 a.m. and you're going to go for that run or you're going to go to the gym. And it's not necessary.
I think that's great. That's actually the first time that we've ever had that absolution. So I like that. That's fantastic. And I totally agree. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and I'm like, yeah, I can do this. And sometimes in the afternoon, I'm like, I can also do this now. So, some people, it's just whatever your body's feeling. So I think that's wonderful. I like that.
Yeah. Like I said, if it works for you, I'm not saying it's bad, but if it doesn't work for you, don't feel bad about yourself.
Yeah. It's not 100% necessary to be successful in it. I love that. Well, Haley, this conversation was so great. I absolutely loved it. And you have your book and you have another book coming out. So if people want to find your book and read your book or find you on social media or online, where can they find all that?
Well, you can find Strong Like Her wherever books are sold. It's available from any local bookseller if you ask them for it, as well as online outlets that people like to buy books from. And you can find me on Instagram at Haley Shapley. My website is HaleyShapley.com. And my next book will be out in March. So still some time to go, but that will also be available wherever books are sold.
Amazing. I love that. Well, I'm going to put all of those links down in the show notes for you all. Haley, thank you so much for your time and your insights today. I think this episode was so great, especially for the women listening, to really know the history of where we came from and where we are now. So thank you so much for that.
Thanks so much, Abby. Great to talk to you.
All right, everyone. That is it for today's episode of Talk Your Abs Off, and I will see you on the next one.